Welcome to the new season of the Live Your Spa Life show. The SPA in Spa Life stands for Seek Power Always, that divine power within you to do what you're here to do. The theme for this season is intentional living. Amazing people like you share ways to live by design and with purpose to ensure that this short ride of life occurs with choice, physically, financially, spiritually, and in your relationships to create a world-class life. In these times of uncertainty, it's time for you to move past the distractions and start trusting yourself more through your God-giving knowingness. No one truly knows better what's best for you than you. In this season, you'll have plenty of examples of people choosing their best life and creating a positive impact through intentional living. Thank you for sharing your precious time with us and being part of the Live Your Spa Life conversation. With us today is Andrea Steinbrenner, CEO of Exit Consulting Group. Exit Consulting Group helps business owners find their win by determining their exit strategy. Their exit engineers work hand in hand with business owners to find the best plan for them and their business. Andrea emphasizes the importance of clear communication and demonstrates this skill by listening to the wants, needs, goals, and priorities of each client before collaborating to find the starting point in the client's journey. She searches to find solutions that best fit the client and move them towards their goals while maintaining their company's culture and values. Andrea's win is seeing people succeed and helping them find the best way to reach their goals. Andrea, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Diane. Pleasure to be here.
Well, I love this because, so many of us as entrepreneurs and company leaders, we're familiar with having the owner-operator model. And a lot of times people don't think with the end in mind and how they are going to exit. And a lot of times don't even see what that even looks like. And I know part of your forte in your company is helping people kind of move that model into a sustainable professional services firm. How do people even look at that when they've been the person running the ship?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a great segue into what we do. So, a lot of my focus has been in my career is helping business owners do exactly what you speak about, which is identifying and recognizing where they are in the center of their business and how they want to evolve that area of their business as they think about an exit. And it usually starts with something small, like the business owner still running payroll, moves to something a little bit bigger, like they might be the one out doing all the sales for the organization or generating the new customer relationships and driving contracts. And so first and foremost, what we do is we sit with business owners and we do what's called an assessment. And we just look at what's going on under the hood, right? It's easy to take for granted all the things that we as business owners are touching on a daily life in our business. So bringing in that outside perspective to do an assessment, do an analysis, say, what are you doing in your business every day? And why are you so mission critical to the execution? Identifying those value drivers and then figuring out which areas do they want to start to consider, maybe prying their hands off a little bit, letting other professionals come in and see if they can actually take a step to the side.
Right. Well, and I'm assuming that there's, several steps along the way and some benchmarks as well. So if somebody is kind of, chief cook and bottle cook and all the, these things, what does that look like? Is that a 1 year, 5 year, 10 year?
Yeah, it's a great question. It really depends on, what we start with is our goal is to always make sure the company is a going concern, right? So that should anyone in the company, whether it be the business owner or the chief financial officer or the office manager, leave or go on vacation, the company can still stand on its own and survive. Many people start businesses with the intent to leave a legacy behind. So we start with finding out what the goals are of the business owner before we make any moves or any recommendations or start pulling levers. Sometimes the goal of a business owner is to create a liquidity event for themselves. That looks very different than someone who wants to leave a long-term legacy and or potentially grow business and scale business. So depending on what the goals are of the business owner, that drives what the KPIs are, and that drives what the timeline looks like behind each one of them. So a business owner that founded their business 40 years ago and is now looking for an exit has a different timeline than a new entrepreneur who's 30 years old and right at the beginning of a startup company. So we really start with the business owner's win. What is their win? How to help them accomplish it, and then set the strategic roadmap behind that.
Got it. Now, I know one of the things that can be challenging in a company is not only finding the right people, but having them be in the right seat. What is the philosophy in terms of, because a lot of times I talk to my client about like, okay, what if you like your right-hand person gets hit by a bus, right? Those kind of things. Like, do people have, is it better for people to have kind of multiple hats and be able to step into multiple roles? Or is it more of a focus of niching into, you stay in your lane and do what you do best?
Yeah, so the balance is probably somewhere in the middle of those. What we find is that a lot of times when we're dealing with founders of companies, that we call them Generation One, they've set up the company to kind of be hub and spoke. So they're in the middle of the company and everyone's operating around them. And a lot of times those key people that are operating around them are people that they're known entities. So they're family members, their neighbors, their friends, and they are cross-pollinated across disciplines in the company, but not necessarily professionals in those spaces. They jumped in to help out. The company was small. It was manageable up to a certain degree. So when we really talk about shifting a business from being owner operated to professionally run, we actually ask the business owner to identify key departments and bring in either internal hires that can take on those roles and or professional firms that work in fractional capacities to come in and help. And this is across all business industries. It's not just service-based industries. It could be production, it could be manufacturing, it could be distribution. It happens across all business models because we all start small and then we grow. And so it's really figuring out, what does that company need to be survivable in the long term? And you do want cross-pollination in your company, because you can't just go out and make new hires because people want to go on vacation, right? But a lot of times, to your point earlier, we see that the sous chef is the head chef, is the marketing agent, is running the books, is serving the dishes out in the dining room, is the hostess stand, is taking reservations. And so that's where you go, okay, now we're getting a little bit far stretched. And there's certain disciplines that are relatable and rely on each other, but there's some that just need to be separated.
Right. This kind of reminds me, I'm thinking of some people in key positions where one of the challenging things when people have been used to wearing all of those hats is delegation, right? Is to take those things off the plate where there's a little bit of the mindset of, I don't have time to train that person, or no one does it like I do it. How do you start kind of pulling away some of those things so people can free up their plate to really do their niche?
It goes back to the goal, right? So if we are supporting business owners to help them achieve their goals, and one day that means exit their business, I consult on this all day long. I fall back on the company line. Your goal is to exit one day, and your goal is to leave a legacy. And so we can't do that if you're still touching and doing everything. And usually it takes about a year for the business owner or that next generation running it to really emotionally wrap their head around what that means to step aside. Logically, they know they need to do it, but emotionally, it hasn't met it yet. And what we find is in human nature is that when logic is high, emotion's typically low. And when emotion's high, logic's typically low. And so we spend about a year building trust, establishing processes, and working to get those two in balance. So as we actually start to make shifts in the company, we don't end up backtracking on ourselves because we haven't adjusted logic or emotion.
Right. Well, I'm sure that's comforting for our listeners to hear, because I think a lot of times the fear is that, the next day or the next week that they're going to, lose their position and their power and what they've been used to in the company, and to really walk someone through that emotional change, right? Because a lot of times people identify themselves as, their baby, their company.
Absolutely.
And to transition through that can be, really challenging.
Yeah, it's a great point. And a great analogy is thinking of a star player on a football team, right? They're the quarterback. They're on all the news press conferences. They get all the awards and the rings, and then they end up retiring off the field and they become a head coach, right? So now they're actually coaching people and they're helping them be great, but they're not actually making the plays. They're running the plays. Well, that head coach may then one day want to own a team, right? And so it's getting that then new mind shift from getting off the playing field and getting up in the owner's box. So they're no longer at the sideline holding the clipboard, talking in their earpiece, telling them what to do. They're watching and they're really guiding and mentoring from afar. And I will tell you, wonderful examples of success are when owners can get in the owner box and stick around and be a mentor and be a guide, because the next generation of leadership doesn't want to have to figure everything out. That's the benefit of them coming in behind a founder. And they want to be able to lean on that mentor and that coach. Unfortunately, what we see happen is because there becomes such an emotional rub in that transition, the founder or that owner mentality disappears altogether because it's just too much. And they don't know how to bridge the gap between holding the clipboard and calling the plays to being up in the owner box. And or the next generation doesn't know how to lean into the coaching and tries to muscle their way through and do it their way. And there's a break. And what we really pride ourselves on at ECG is that we care about the relationship, the long-term partnership and collaboration. And so we'll take as much time as we need to help bridge that gap, because we're all in the business of people, personally and professionally, and broken relationships is no one's goal.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the things I love about you and your company is you're walking the walk. Like, you are literally second generation coming in. Talk a little bit about how that transition was for you and just some of the experiences as you are actually doing that within your own company.
Yeah. So John Overham's our founder and my partner, along with another gentleman named Scott, who joined us just a little while ago. Scott Spohr is our CFO. John started the company about 15 years ago because he sold his first business and it was not a great experience. He had people around him moving him through the transaction, but nobody was moving him and his family members he owned it with through the transition. And the transition is actually a lot bigger than the transaction most of the time. So by the time he got done with his transaction, he felt alone, he felt confused, he felt lost. And this is someone who was a Arthur Anderson CPA. This is a smart guy. He knew what he knew business. He knows business. He still does. But the whole thing just felt very confusing, and there wasn't a lot of education around it. And so he started sharing his story with his peers, and his peers invited them into their transaction because they didn't want to have that same experience. So as he progressed through his career with Exit, he realized he needed a succession plan, and him and I were introduced by a co-peer in the marketplace and hit it off. And our goal was really to spend about 5 years growing ECG together. I joined a couple of years ago, and about year 4, I would move into CEO. And what ended up matriculating through all of that was we were very focused on shifting the company from being owner operated to professionally run. And it doesn't come without its own blood, sweat, and tears, even us going into it with our eyes wide open. I will tell you, no one's above reproach. About midway through that, John and I sat down, and John said, it's time. We need to pull the trigger, and we need to make the shift. And I'm not going anywhere. I'm sticking around, but let's pull the trigger. Let's let you come in, start running it, and let me guide and mentor. And so we did that, Q4 of 2022. And it has been wonderful and challenging. And I will tell you, it's wonderful and it's challenging because we're in the people business. And what John and I had was a really good relationship going into it. And we have a really good relationship coming out of it, probably even better than going in. But we're willing to work through friction together, and we're willing to work through struggle and challenge. And there's things that I like to do that he scratches his head, and there's things he does, and I think we don't do it that way anymore. And it's the normal G1, G2 shift. And what's been really unique and unintentional, but beautiful in the marketplace is we've been doing this side by side with our clients in real time and sharing our wins and sharing our struggles and our pain along the way. And it makes it very relevant for our clients, but it also makes serving our clients very relevant for us as a firm, because our team is also watching their leaders go through this transition and shift together. And so as they're identifying and recognizing what we're going through as a firm, they're able to see that in our clients as well and bring that authenticity forward.
Right. Well, you and I have also had just some sidebar conversations around relationships, right? Because that's the name of the game here, is what they were kind of prior to CEO in a peer-to-peer, and now you're in a different position in terms of people being able to reach out and reach you. It's like there's so many companies that want to establish like an open door policy, and being able to structure that in who you're talking to as far as your upper line managers and what they are then relaying to other people. Talk a little bit about some of the stop points, if you will, and some of the boundaries that you've had to put in place and things that you actually are recommending to business owners in terms to be able to make the most of their time and their talents.
Yeah, it's great. So I was just speaking about this with somebody this morning, actually. I've kind of coined the term authentic influence, if you will. We all understand when somebody is influencing us in a positive way because we feel motivated, we want to go the extra mile, we feel energized by it, we have peace about what we're doing within that sphere of influence. And, we want to just go and take the next hill. We also have all experienced inauthentic influence. And what I mean by that is there are, and I don't think leaders set out to do this. Let me caveat that. But there are leaders who hear the next inspirational thing or attend a conference or read an article, and they want to bring all of that forward to the group of people they're influencing. But the challenge with that type of personality and characteristic, if you're not aware of it, is that you're constantly just bringing something new to the forefront, but there's no action behind it. And so it ends up leaving your team or your sphere of influence feeling very hollow, and they end up distrusting the information. And we've all been there where you go, oh, just another good idea, right? Nothing's going to happen from that. And so as I continue to step into the CEO role, that's very new for me, and evolve, I'm aware of how my consistent actions are reflected in the workplace, and things that maybe was okay and within the boundaries of being a COO and below in a company are probably less appropriate for a CEO. And it's not that, there's weird HR boundaries or something like that being crossed, but there's just a certain aspiration that comes with certain titles and organizations, and your company, your team, the marketplace views you through that, and they want to view you through that. And if you step outside of that sphere, it's uncomfortable for everybody, and they don't know how to interpret, don't know how to relate, and they no longer feel safe. And so, for instance, one of the just kind of internal standards I've put in place since the shift is I intentionally try to not have one-on-one meetings with anyone that's below a director level in my organization. I love every single one of my staff. We're a small team of 15. It's not like we're this big 100-person company that I don't know everybody's name, but I can see that it makes my staff uncomfortable if we're one-on-one, because they don't know how to interpret my movements, my actions, my words. And I've been in the game 15 years longer than some of them. So I might say things and they don't know what I'm talking about, but they won't tell me that because they feel like they have to know. I don't want my team to feel that way, right? I want them to have a safe place to learn and grow and experience. And so just internally, I meet with my staff. I just make sure there's at least 2 of them around, right? Because then they have an out, they have an outlet, even in a very organic, natural, soft conversation where they can make eye contact with each other, or shrug their shoulder a little bit, or write something down for the other person and then go look it up together when I leave the room. That is what I mean by being authentically influential, is knowing that, reading that room, having the emotional intelligence to say, hey, let's make sure everyone's set up to succeed. Because the other thing is if you put people in situations where they don't feel safe or they're uncomfortable, they're not going to gain anything from the entire experience. They're just going to be a deer in headlights. And that's not the type of organization any of us want to run.
Right. Well, and there's a transition time as well, because especially if somebody met you at a certain position, and this happens as people get promoted and get evolve in the company, they take on different roles. And also part of that reaching down lower in the company, again, it comes back to that delegation and prioritizing your time. And I love that aspect about, building trust. When you are really dealing with your top line people, you are building that trust with them, which in turn, they're able to trickle that down, and you're kind of able to show this kind of smooth running machine versus the top person, trying to touch everybody at once and kind of, leading some confusion because of the relating to each other and what that may look like. So, it's just great to be able to kind of step through this as you're going through it yourself. I think that a lot of your clients would feel, warm and fuzzy about, okay, you're in this with us, not only together, but you're actually experiencing it too in real time, right? Which is the best experience that people can really understand. And I think part of that too is, there can be some fear along the way, right? And how people deal with fears, and sometimes it's the unknown. You talk a little bit about kind of looking at worst case scenario. You talk through a little bit when things get challenging or feel a little bit fearful, and how you kind of walk through those.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I've been joking in the last 6 months with people saying, if you would have asked me a year ago, 18 months ago, how I see the world or how I view things, I would probably give you a cliched line like, I'm a student of life, right? I'm learning every day. And I think there was a part of me that believed it, but there was a part of me that was like, I think I might have this figured out. And now every day I feel like I am definitely a student of life, and I am learning every day, and I am good with it. I'm good with where I'm at. And I laugh about it now, and I say it with humility because I mean it. I can laugh at myself. But yeah, just yesterday we had a client situation come up, and it's hard in client service, especially when you're a boutique firm, because we are still servicing clients at all levels. So I get met with challenges on the client service side. And when you're at the top, it's who do I turn to? What do I do? Who do I talk to about it? And am I doing this right? And is this representing the firm correctly? So, yesterday I called my partner up, and one of my staff was with them in a meeting, and they were driving back from it. And I said, I'm going to have to just riff with you about this, and we're going to have to figure this out. And our staff gets to participate in it. And it's good because that staff will probably have a lot of these encounters in their career, and to know, one, they're going to happen. So when they happen, it's okay, right? You're going to hit roadblocks. That's part of relationship, much less life and work. Two, there's people around you who can work through it with you, and you don't have to have all the answers. And I think that's part of being a good leader, and part of even that intentional influence, authentic influence, is saying, we're figuring this out too, right? We don't have all the answers, and it is lonely at the top. Who does the CEO call on their way home from work when they've had a bad day and they just need a vent, right? And there's only so much you want to vent at home because you love your job, you love your company. So I think it's finding those people in your firm and outside of your firm that you can call. They can be your sounding board. And then when it's appropriate, share it with your team, because they're going through struggles too. And you want them to be able to talk about it, and you want them to be able to brainstorm, work, and collaborate.
Right. Well, you and I have talked about, that we get to be that role for people, in so many different ways where, they don't want to just blurt everything that's going on, like in their personal life, or, as they're struggling through different things, or they're trying to sometimes just voice out loud to somebody who can listen and kind of see from, either some altitude on it or some perspective, so that they can kind of gather their thoughts together so that they can have some continuity as they are then sharing and disseminating information with other people, that they can kind of come with having that opportunity to get their thoughts together. So, having a coach or consultant, at that lonely level, can you expand a little bit about how that can help people when they are in those positions?
Yeah, I experience it. I have 3 different coaches that I work with on an ongoing basis, because they all bring something different to my life and to my team. But it's really important to have a place, an outlet to express what's going on. And sometimes it's not even needing a recommendation or advice. It's exactly what you said. It's just being able to articulate what's going on and taking a couple passes at doing it, because at any given day, someone will come to you at the top, and you're at the top of your company, and they just want you to have the answer. And sometimes you just need a place to go and flesh that out, right? And say, let me get back to you. I got to go work on this, but I just need a warm body that's safe, that can listen and kind of repeat back to me what I'm saying. Sometimes you need some advice, right? Sometimes you need a recommendation or insight or referral. So, I think it's really important. And I think the place where I find the most grace and also appreciation is that business owners choose to link arms with me and my firm. They invite us to have a seat at the table and have that kind of open kimono relationship. And that to me is a very special place. And we don't take that for granted. We don't take it lightly. And when that phone rings at 5:30 at night, we pick it up because they're choosing to call us. And I have found sometimes I call my clients too, that I have a good relationship with, and it's a give and take. And one thing that John, Scott, and I all really believe in is long-term partnerships. Yes, we're in client service, but partnerships go both ways. So we lean into that. I think, you and I are experiencing that in our relationship. It's not about just the here and now, it's about the long term. And, I think that's where the value really comes in.
Absolutely. And a lot of times when people are listening, they look at where you are now and see that as, the success, the peak, the apex of where you're at. And, a lot of times sharing some of those parts of the journey that maybe you feel like disempowered, and, maybe sharing some of the bumpy parts of the road and how you kind of got through those, and how you're able to then stand in your power.
Yeah, I think when I feel disempowered is when I feel unseen and unheard. And I've experienced that throughout my career in different elements. And not even because people were intentionally dismissing me, but it just happens, right? So what I've learned to do, and I'm learning to do, is to, take a step back. First, try to understand motives, because a lot of times people misinterpret their emotion for other people's motives. And I think it's really important to be aware of that, and then circle back around and try to gain some footing. And sometimes when I'm feeling those things, I'll just dismiss myself from the situation. There's been a couple times where I've had to completely change what I'm doing or where I'm working, but not because there was bad intent or motive. We were just not aligned anymore. And so I think, not feeling heard, not being seen, and not feeling aligned with my peers is the most disheartening thing for me. And so right now, if and when those instances happen, and they do, because I'm in relationships with people at work, instead of making assumptions or going down rabbit holes, I set time aside to go and have just a heart to heart with that person, and especially my partners, and sit down and say, hey, when this happened, I felt this way, but I know your heart. I know where you're coming from. So let's talk about it and understand. Clients too. There'll be sometimes clients will call you up and they'll want you to move the sky for them. And you have to say, hey, I know where you're coming from. I appreciate you think I can move the sky, but I can't, or I can't in this time frame. And so I think figuring out how to break down those barriers so that those instances happen less and less, and when they do, they're not so monumental, has been a huge tool for me in the last specifically 3 to 4 years.
Yes. Oh, that is such a beautiful distinction, because having some of those uncomfortable conversations, if you can kind of nip some of those things in the bud, and especially being able to articulate when you know their heart, right? And that's part of the relationship that you've built with them, is what's behind what people are experiencing, what they're doing, but to be able to put it out on the table early on, right? Because as we know, these things can build on each other, and then down the road, it's like, remember that thing that happened, 3 years ago? Like, you don't want to have those things popping up, when you can just be proactive with that and be able to kind of hit it early on. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just part of evolving as a human. It's part of maturing as an adult. But, I can look back on my life and see when I didn't have that awareness and understanding, and the detriment to people who are really important to me. Right. And so, if I can leave anyone in leadership specifically with something, is, just take that step back and look at the heart, and don't get caught up in the emotion, because people care. Ultimately, people actually care, and we're all just trying to do it right. And we don't always get it right. And so just being aware of that and being humble about it and moving forward is the key.
Absolutely. Well, we've got, a glimpse into your professional life. And one of the things I like to ask during interviews is, we live differently in our kitchen versus our living room or our bedroom. And we get to create those spaces that inspire us, that make us feel safe, that really make us enjoy what we have created in our home life. So what's your favorite room in your home and why?
Ooh, that's a good one. I would say my favorite room in my home is my dining room. And I would say it's because when my husband and I met when we were young, I wasn't even out of college yet, and he went and enlisted in the Navy right away. And when he got out, we got married, got out of being enlisted, moved into being an officer, and we made our first significant purchase, and it was our dining room and our hutch. And we had this kind of unspoken agreement that no matter how many times we moved with the military and where we went in the world, the dining room table and the hutch were coming. And we've actually made strategic moves and not moved into certain places because the dining room and hutch would not fit in the space. So 20 years later, it's still standing, and it's very symbolic, and it's very simple. It's nothing ornate and fancy, but it means a lot to us. And it's communal. It's where all of our people gather. It's where our family sups. It's where guests sit. There's markings on the table that have stories in them now, from, misapplied icing on Christmas cookies that have stained it, to salad falling and staining it, to crayons. And, it tells a story. So
I love that. I think it's always fun to just get a glimpse into things that inspire people, that mean something. And it makes me think back to when my kids were young, and they'd find a rock, and it was that rock has to stay in the house. It's just what it means to one person doesn't necessarily mean that to somebody else. And so I just think that is such a fun way to get an insight into people. And, speaking of that insight, I know that our listeners are going to want to stay in contact with you. How can they best do that?
Yeah, so they can go to our website, exitconsulting.com, and fill out a form, and it'll come straight to me. They can find us on LinkedIn as well, both my company and myself, Andrea Steinbrenner, and I'd love to hear from them.
Perfect. Well, as you know, our theme for this season is inspired living. So in what way are you living an inspired life today?
Wow, Diane, hit me with the hard questions at the end here. I would say the way I'm living an inspired life today is, it's deep, but I think it's staying in touch with these outside influences, my coaches, that can give me perspective so that I stay grounded. I try to put my feet on the ground barefoot every day and get grounded, and not get caught up in the busyness, get caught up in the scheduling, get caught up in ego and all of the other things that can happen in life, but keep my feet on the ground, remind myself of who I am, remind myself of what matters to me, why I care, and just take some deep breaths.
I love it. I know that you're such a purposeful person, and you do things with intention. And I think that this is something that is so helpful for people to hear, your wisdom from your journey. And I just want to thank you for sharing that with us here today.
Thank you so much for asking me to be here. It's been a pleasure.
You got it. And to our listeners out there, okay, you solopreneurs who've been out there just kicking it, it may be time to really look at what is your exit plan. Maybe it is something that you want to look at in the next couple of years. Maybe it's something even 20 years from now, but to start having that conversation and start building that today, and having that support, to have somebody to talk to along the way, to build those trust relationships, and to really take to heart some of the things that we've talked about here today as you move forward into your life. And until we connect again, live your SPAlife. Bye for now. Bye-bye.